note the time the meeting opened at. I'd like to begin with acknowledging the traditional owners on the land in which we meet today. I'd like to also pay my respects to elders past and present. Please note this meeting is being recorded and streamed live on Council's website in accordance with the City's public participation in Council meeting policy, which can be viewed on the Council's website. All reasonable care is taken to maintain your privacy. However, as a visitor in the public gallery, your presence may be recorded. By remaining in the public gallery, it is assumed your consent is given if your image is broadcast. The recommendations contained in this agenda are officers' recommendations only and should not be acted upon until Council has resolved to adopt those recommendations. The resolutions of Council should be confirmed by perusing the minutes of the Council meeting at which these recommendations were considered. Members of the public should also note that they act at their own risk if they enact any resolution prior to receiving official written notification of Council's decision. The purpose of agenda briefing sessions is for councillors to ask questions and obtain additional information in respect to items presented on the ordinary council meeting agenda. Questions to ask by councillors are to be answered by the CEO or a person nominated by the CEO or acting CEO in tonight's case, or the presiding member. No decisions are made at agenda briefing sessions, no statements are to be made, no debate on items conducted. The record of attendance tonight, we have Councillor Winner, good evening, Councillor O'Donnell, Councillor Turner and Councillor Viskovich. Staff members that we have in attendance tonight is Director for Advocacy and Strategy, Mia Hicks, Director of Engineering, Louis Camporelli, Director of Corporate and Commercial, Cassandra Yeager on the phone. Executive Manager for Finance, Sandra Kernock, Executive Manager for Risk, Governance and Risk Services, Francis Liston, and Governance Officer, Jamie Boys. And we have our two IT officers here tonight as well, Samrak Acharya and Gaurav Goswami. Tonight for the press, we have Neil, and apologies for this evening's meeting. We have Mayor Wilson, Councillor Bodica and Councillor Johnson. Members of staff, apologies, CEO Andrew O'Brien, and leave of absence, we have Neil. Notification of interest. We have interest affecting impartiality by Mayor Glenn Wilson, has an impartiality in item 15.4.2, the 2025 Red Dust Revival sponsorship, because he has completed volunteering with the Variety in the last 12 months. There are no financial interests or proximity interests this evening. Okay, we'll go through beginning with the reports of committees, and 14.1.1, the December 2024 quarterly commercial business reports. I'll pass over to the CEO.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll refer this one to Sandra Kernock, the Executive Manager of Finance.
Thank you. So for the Chair, 14.1 shows the December 2024 quarterly commercial business reports for the various commercial business. Don't really have much more to add than what's in the reports.
Councillors, did you want any further questions for the Director. Thank you, Director. I would just like to ask, with the Oasis, it notes in there the membership. Are we able to find out a membership breakdown for corporate memberships as well as individual families to better understand, I suppose, corporate responsibility of major organisations and their contribution to the city?
Thank you, Ms Mayor. Yes, we'll have to take that one on notice.
Thank you. 14.1.2, corporate performance reporting. I'll hand over to the Acting CEO, Frances Liston.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through the Chair, this report is an update in relation to our quarterly progress for our corporate business plan, our major projects and our services for the period October through December 2024.
Councillors, are there any questions for the Director of Governance and Risk Services? Councillor Turner.
Just through the Mayor, I had a question in regards to the major projects that were on track. Our footpath construction and reconstruction, I note that there's a note in there about CBD works to be completed. There's nothing about the Burt Street works in there. So if we could maybe get that taken on notice, that we could get an update on those Burt Street works to make sure that they're on track.
Through to the Acting CEO.
Deputy Mayor, I believe Director Camporelli is able to answer that tonight.
Thank you, Director Camporelli.
Thank you, through the Mayor. The Burt Street footpath works aren't on the schedule of works because they're scheduled for the 25-26 and not for 24-25.
Any other questions, councillors? I do have a couple, probably through to Director Camporelli as well. I note in the corporate business action plan that, sorry, just flicking through, that GEHO received support through DSS brokerage funding for a bus. So this one's probably not you, but the next one will be. The funding arrangement, is that separate to rates paid by local residents?
I understand it is, yes.
Thank you. My other question relates to major projects of roads resurfacing and the renewal program. In the history of the city, I note that this is valued at 22 million and with grant funding for 15 million. Is this the largest renewal program the city's had to date?
I can only talk of my last 23 years' experience, and it's the largest in the last 23 years.
Thank you. And adding on to that, do you think that in conjunction with the footpath and cycleway program are contributing to projects overlapping and creating inconveniences throughout the city from a public perspective at the moment?
Through the Mayor, that's part of the reason, but it's definitely not the whole reason.
Thank you. And as part of this, would we be able to have a renewal, I suppose, breakdown over the last 10 years to see what has been done for a comparison in that time?
You most certainly can, and take it on notice and provide that back to the council.
Thank you, Director. We'll go through reports of committees for December 14, 1, 3. No, it's not there. 15 reports of officers, sorry. 15.1.1. Accounts payable report for January 2025.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Executive Manager Finance will speak to Council in relation to this one.
Thank you. So report 15.1.1 shows the accounts payable report for the month of January 2025. This totals just under 9 million, which is below the monthly average. However, it's not unreasonable given the Christmas period with suppliers being on leave and reduced works. It's also not unreasonable following on December's payment being slightly above average at approximately 11 million.
Thank you, Manager of Finance. Do councillors have any questions for the Executive Manager of Finance? We'll move on to 15.1.2, Statement of Financial Activity for December 2024. Thank you.
Thank you. So through Deputy Mayor, 15.12 shows the SOFA for December. I've got no further comments on the variances than what's noted within the report, and most of these variances have been addressed as part of the mid-year budget review.
Thank you, councillors. Do we have any questions for the Director? And I believe the next one is for yourself as well. 15.1.3, the mid-year review of annual budget 2024-2025.
Thank you. 15.1.3 does show the mid-year budget review for the 2025 financial year. So this is where the budget has been reviewed against year-to-date actuals and it's taken into consideration the progress of key projects. Income showing a 3.2 million increase based on the original budget, mainly due to additional operational grants being received and an increase in airport fees and charges due to increased passenger numbers compared to our original estimations. Operating costs are approximately 1.5 million higher than budget, with materials and contractors being 4.4 million higher and a 3 million reduction in employee costs due to vacancies. The mid-year budget review shows a decrease in CapEx of approximately 22 million due to various reasons. One being the timing of the delivery of assets, so the time it takes for the assets to be physically arriving in Kalgoorlie. So that accounts for approximately 5 million. Some projects are being delayed to future years as a strategic direction, for example, the GAC car park roof, and others have been delayed just to ensure there is a focus on perfecting planning and design during the financial year of 2025 prior to commencing construction, for example, the airport master plan. With the reduction in CapEx, a reduction in loans has occurred. So where we originally estimated we would need 31.5 million to fund all of the works for this financial year, that's been reduced to 22 million. Reserve movements have also been amended to reflect the adjustments. Overall, the budget is showing an expected surplus of 248 grand for June 2025 financial year.
Thank you, Director Curnow. Councillors, do we have any questions for the Director? Councillor Viskovich.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just through the Mayor, I wanted to confirm the prices in the brackets that when we've got a variance, is that the price difference? So you've got a variance of, I think there's in brackets 0.09. My agenda won't load. Is that the difference in the variance in the conclusion?
Yep. So through the Deputy Mayor, are you referring to the numbers within the body of the report? Yeah. So yes, it's likely that that's explaining the difference. Do you know which section specifically? I'm going to assume that you might be referring to the materials and contractors, or maybe the projects section. So if you were to add up all the numbers, and if it says partially offset by, and then it's got brackets, if you were to take them off, that number then comes to what the movement is. Yeah.
Thank you, Director. Thank you, Councillor Viskovich. Are there any other questions for the Director, councillors? We'll move on to 15.1.4, the 2025-2026 Budget Development Timetable, and that's also Director of Finance.
Thank you. 15.1.4 shows the budget timetable for the financial year 2026 budget preparation. So this document shows the plan for the city staff and council to work through to ensure that the budget is adopted in the July 2025 OCM.
Thank you. Do councillors have any questions? Councillor Turner.
Just to the Director, through the Deputy Mayor, I'm referring to the budget timetable here, and I'm sure that this is a typo or just something that's not in the right sequence. It's got in there, which you can take on notice, everything, I'm wondering if things are supposed to be in sequential date format so there's got a date commenced by, a date completed by. It's I don't know, maybe it's just me, but it's not in order, some of them, so I don't know if it's supposed to be that way, or it's just a little bit confusing for me because they're not in date sequential. There's a bit of jumping around.
Yep. So through the Deputy Mayor, so the sequential order does work with the completed by, I believe, and also like the dates of when the council meetings are or the agenda briefings, they should go in order, but I'll take that on notice to triple check.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Thank you, Executive Manager. Councillors, do we have any further questions? Okay, the next item on next week's agenda is 15.1.5, new provisions for superannuation payments to council members, and that is also the Executive Manager of Finance.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So 15.1.5 just speaks on the new provisions for payment of superannuation to elected members. So following the Local Government Amendment Act 2024, there's been some new sections entered, 5.99B to 5.99E of the Local Government Act, which allows local governments to resolve by absolute majority to make superannuation contributions for council members from 1 February 2025. From 19th of October 2025, these will become mandatory for all Class 1 and 2 local governments, which includes the City of Kalgoorlie-Boulder. So city staff are waiting on some more information, given this is quite new. Once we have more information, we'll be able to put forward a report to council to allow the elected members to make an informed decision. WALGA are running a webinar on Wednesday the 12th of February, which will assist in collating with the relevant information needed, with a report being brought to council in March.
Thank you, Executive Manager. Councillors, Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Council's only being requested to approve the CEO to gather the necessary information. In all other things that come to a council, we have to declare financial proximity. My query in this is, clearly, we all have a financial interest in this. Why is this different to anything else? I would just assume this should be just done by a CEO and... Yep, sorry, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. I'll pop that straight through to the Executive Manager, Kerno.
Thank you, Ms Deputy Mayor. There is an exemption for this under the Act, in that the exemption allows the elected members to vote on this particular item.
Thank you, Executive Manager. Councillors, any more questions for Councillor Winner?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just through the Deputy Mayor to the Executive Manager, just to be clear, at this point in time, Council has no option but to accept this change, as it will be mandatory for councils of our band. Is that correct?
So it becomes mandatory from the 19th of October 2025, but I do believe there is the option to vote yourself out of receiving superannuation contribution should you wish to, through written notice to the CEO. But again, there'll be a lot more information in the March OCM report once I have everything.
Thank you.
Councillors, any further questions? I have one. Relating to the same issues, could you please, I feel like you've started to explain why councillors don't have a financial interest. Is that because this is a report to be written and not actually the accepting of the superannuation payment?
I might, do you know this one? I'll hand over to the acting CEO on this.
The exception under the regulations enables council to vote notwithstanding that there's a financial interest in relation to the outcome.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Executive Manager of Finance. We'll move on to the next one, and that's 15.16, Conduct of Local Government Election, and I'll hand that over to the Director of Governance and Risk Services, Frances Liston.
Thank you. Through the Chair, this is just an update report to confirm the appointment of the WA Electoral Commissioner to be responsible for the 2025 local government election. Council made the decision in 2023 that would be the case, so it's a formality in terms of paperwork. I have, however, noticed that there is an error in relation to the motion set out in this particular officer recommendation that we'll need to rectify to bring it in line with the attached letter from the WAEC.
Thank you. Councillors, any questions? Nope. Councillor Viskovich.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Can we just confirm what the change will be for the officer's recommendation, please?
Thank you. Through the Chair, the letter that's attached to this report sets out the requirements for the wording of the resolution. So this report was prepared before that letter had come through, and then the cross-check wasn't finalised to pick that up. But it's an absolute majority vote, and it will pick up slightly different wording in relation to this resolution, and also confirmation that it will be hang on, it's not an in-person, a paper ballot. What's their wording? Sorry, postal election is the wording I'm looking for. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, councillors. Any further questions? 15.18, Local Government Act Reform Consultation on CEO KPIs and online registers. I'll hand this over to the Executive Manager of Governance and Risk Services, Frances, to comment.
Thank you. Through the Chair, I think we might have jumped a report, but we can come back to it. So this report is setting out recommendations in relation to a position to be taken by the city in relation to some regulations pertaining to online registers and some requirements for publishing of that material. The CEO Performance Review Committee set out and was adopted through Council in the January OCM, the second part of that paper, which related to CEO KPIs and employment standards. So this report just pertains to the second half of that consultation, which is the online register.
Thank you, Executive Manager. Councillors, do we have any questions? No? How efficient of me to jump over the other Executive Manager, and we'll just pop back to 15.17, the 2025 Australian Local Government National General Assembly, and we'll hand over to Director of Advocacy and Strategy, Mia Hicks.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through the Chair, Council is asked to adopt the Kalgoorlie-Boulder Advocacy Position Framework and the Kalgoorlie-Boulder Regional Partnership for Economic and Social Transformation. These documents have been prepared for the purpose of providing a structured, long-term framework for economic and social transformation here in Kalgoorlie-Boulder. They are also ensure that there's a consistent, unified approach when advocating to state and federal governments to secure funding and on a variety of government policies, strategies, and reform initiatives which are pertinent to the city. These documents are intended to be living documents, which will be updated as projects are developed or become investment ready, or as government policy or strategy changes. They will also serve as the foundation to guide the development of motions which are presented at the Australian Local Government Association's National General Assembly of Local Government 2025. And sorry, through the chair, we also request that any councillors interested in attending the Australian Local Government Association's National General Assembly to please let the Executive Manager of Governments know before the next OCM.
Thank you, Executive Manager. Councillors, are there any questions for the Manager? Councillor Turner.
Just to the Director through the Deputy Mayor, just a question. That week that's normally held is generally the last sitting week of Federal Parliament before the winter break. Is that correct?
That is, from my understanding, yes.
Yep, okay. And it's traditionally a very, very busy week with lots of meetings crammed in, and we also have a couple of our important alliances that, as a city that we're part of, that generally has meetings that week as well?
That's correct as well.
Okay, so from experience, perhaps as the Director suggested, if we send through the councillors that are interested in attending, but bear in mind that last year we sent an extra...
Sorry, Councillor, is that a question?
It's a question. So last year we sent an extra councillor. If there is if it comes up that more than 2 councillors nominate, if there's a position to send extra, because last year we did have some meetings that clashed and motions that we had to move, and there was a lot of... if we hadn't have had the extra councillor there, we could have had a problem last year.
Sorry, are you clear on the question?
Yep, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through the chair, I'll take that question on notice and provide the response to council.
Thank you. Councillor Viskovich has a question.
Thank you. Through to the Director, just wondering, do we have a motion that we wish to put forward this sitting or this? Yeah.
Through to the Director. I believe not yet, but the Director may have some further details on that one.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. This motion allows the officers to utilise those 2 documents to guide the development of the motions to the at the conference.
Was there a further question, Councillor Viskovich? No? Any further questions, councillors? No. Thank you, Director. We'll move on to engineering reports now. And 15.2.1, the RFT 001-2425 Oasis Outdoor Pool Design. Director of Engineering, Louis Camporelli. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through the Chair. Council is asked to consider the submissions received for tender number RFT 001-2425 Design Development Services for the Oasis Outdoor Pool. Tender number RFT 001-2425 was advertised on 7th September 2024. The scope of works was to design and build an outdoor pool offering a unique and inviting experience. All tenderers were required to address relevant experience and to include relevant key personnel, capacity to deliver, regional presence, demonstrated understanding and price. The tender closed on the 7th October and the City received 4 submissions. After a thorough review by the panel, it was decided that due to a lack of clarity within the tender documents and the tender's pricing varying so greatly, the scope of the designer may not have been clear enough and to complete the works needed, and the variations of the contract could be that great that it would blow out the budget. So Council is asking to reject the tender RFT 001-2425 and re-tender with a newer scope.
Thank you, Executive Manager. Councillors, do we have any questions? Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you, Acting Deputy Mayor. Just points of clarification. As an example, the weighting, relevant experience, say number A, tender A, they got 20%. So just to clarify, that's 20% out of 100 for relevant experience. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yep. Thank you. And key personnel regional contracting for all 4 tenders didn't have any regional contracting whatsoever in carrying out that job. So no local businesses at all were included in those that tendered.
That is also correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Councillor Viskovich and then Turner.
Thank you. Just through to the director. What kind of time frame is this going to have? Is this going to impact on any of our project timelines that we've got in place at the moment?
This looks to push back by about 3 months.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Turner.
Just to the director through the deputy mayor, I've got 2 questions. The first is, I have no issue sending it back to the drawing board, but I'd like to know what the drawing board was. Were the tenderers tendering apples with apples or apples with oranges? Was there no design, or were they being asked to submit a design?
Director.
They were asked to submit a design, but it was apples and potatoes.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Turner, did you have another
Fantastic.
question?
That's exactly what I wanted to ask. Perhaps before we go back, is there an opportunity to break this into 2 different parts? Maybe we should be putting out for a design process first and then going out to tender, so that all tenderers are very clear on what they're tendering on, and we might get a bit more interest if we've actually got a design. Is that an option?
Councillor Turner, thank you. Director.
Through the deputy mayor, we've done the scoping to break the design right down so that the second time around it's a lot clearer for all tenderers what we're expecting. So we're expecting apples for apples this time.
Thank you, Director. Councillors, are there any further questions? Councillor Winner.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just through the Deputy Mayor to the Director, are we anticipating any additional costs or budget requirements as a result of the proposed delay if the officer's recommendation was to be accepted by Council?
That's yet to be developed, and until we get the prices back, we won't know.
Thank you, Director. Councillor O'Donnell, a further question.
Just a query, a point of clarification, back on that key personnel regional contracting. Are we allowed, going forward in the future, not, could be in years to come, can we make it when we tender that they must have local content with certain priced contracts?
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. I'll take that one through to the Director. Thank you.
We could probably answer it, but I'd prefer to take it on notice and provide a more thorough answer to that one.
Thank you, Director Camporelli. Councillors, are there any further questions for this item? Thank you, Director. We'll move on to 15.3.1, fee waiver request for MT Dance. Thank you. I'll hand through to the Acting CEO to answer any questions on this one at this stage.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through the Chair, this is an update in relation to the status of this particular hire agreement with the Goldfields Arts Centre and a recommendation in relation to the next 6 months' fee implications for the hirer.
Thank you, Executive Manager. Councillors, do we have any questions? Councillor Winner, Turner, O'Donnell at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Just through the Deputy Mayor to the Director, under item 3 of the officer's recommendation, should the recommendation state until 30th of June 2025, not 30th of June 2024?
Through the Chair, yes, that error has been detected and corrected.
Councillor Winner, was there another question?
No, actually, that if the answer was a different answer, it would have been, but no, that one answers that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Winner. And next we'll go to Was it Councillor Turner?
So just through the Deputy Mayor to the Director again, just first a point of clarification. Under details on page 55, it's got the City wrote to MT Dance on the 11th of April 2025. I'm presuming that's a typo and it should be at the 11th of April 2024. So that's if we can get that fixed before next week.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, we'll get that corrected.
Because obviously that makes it a bit confusing for people. And just to clarify, this was identified after a review. I think we've had some new staff and some review of some different things, and it was purely that they divided things by 12 months instead of 6 months. Is that correct?
Through to the Director.
I might ask for some assistance from Director Camporelli, who has a little bit more of that background in his own knowledge compared to myself.
Through the Deputy Mayor, that is correct. Yep.
Thank you, Director. I do believe that was in the attachments. It did note that clarification as well. Councillor Turner, were there any further questions? Councillor O'Donnell, your questions have been answered. Councillor Viskovich, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I am just wondering if there is a opportunity to potentially include in our fees and charges, instead of a longer term hire fee, so that if we can have a daily and a weekly rate, potentially if we could have a monthly rate or even a quarterly rate, so that in instances where we've got our city buildings, assets, thank you, that, you know, we're not losing people. So if we have longer term lease agreements, they are being utilised a whole lot more and longer.
Thank you, Councillor Viskovich. I'll hand over to the Director. Were you clear on that question? Thank you, Director Camporelli.
Correct. Through the Deputy Mayor, as per item 4, the CEO would undertake a review of the fees and charges as part of the development of 25-26, which would incorporate looking at that at the same time.
Thank you, Director. Councillors, are there any further questions? I do have a couple myself. Through to the Director, would you be able to also ask the CEO to potentially investigate calendar year fees and charges schedules for not only this but other, like swim school, where schools have to set their fees in advance? Is there the opportunity for an annual calendar update?
Deputy Mayor, will take it on notice, but I understand the Executive Manager of Finance is already looking at those options going forward.
Thank you. And also I note that point 5 indicates that the schedule and fees will apply from 1 July 2025. Would Council be able to consider that to be 1 January 2026 as an example?
This is only the officer's recommendation. It will be up to Council to change that recommendation next week.
Thank you, Director. Councillors, were there any further questions? No, thank you. The next item on the agenda for next week is 15.4.1, the proposed amendment to Local Planning Scheme number 2, Lot 4565 Broadwood Street, Broadwood. I'll also note that debate on this matter was adjourned at the 20 January 2025 Council meeting, with no members having yet spoken on the item, so we'll be able to continue debate on that one. Councillors, are there any questions for the Manager of Development and Growth? Councillor Turner.
So I dialed into that meeting on the 20th of January, and it was a significant time difference because I was away and it was a little bit difficult to hear what was going on. And I understand there was no debate. But the question I've got is I've got a couple of questions. The first question is that this has already come to council for us to do a change in this, and we said no, I believe. And the second question I have, is this development actually, is this a, I'm just being careful about how I word this, is it already in use? And rather, is this like a retrospective planning that we're being asked for as well? Like, is it already in use? We are asking for forgiveness rather than permission.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll go to the Manager of Development and Growth, Paul Lees. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through the Chair. If I could respond to that question first, please, and if it's okay with the Chair, provide some additional comments, which might be helpful for you to further consider this, because... Yes,
Thank you. That'd be great. Thank you, Paul.
Okay, so first of all, the proposal to add the use workforce accommodation to the schedule would effectively add another use as a potential discretionary use, but would be a discretionary use, to be considered as a possible use on the site. And on the basis that scheme amendment is initiated because of a live development application, which is a JDAP application, and the JDAP has extended the time for consideration of the RA, in other words, Council's report. The DA is still very much alive, and this scheme amendment would, if initiated and ultimately successful, would allow the consideration of that use, would keep the DA alive and allow the consideration of that use. If the scheme amendment wasn't initiated, that would be the end of it. The use is currently an X use, so it's a use that is not permitted. We would still, unless the application was withdrawn, we would still have to provide the regional authority report to the DAP, but my understanding is that DAP would not be able to approve it.
Thank you, Manager for Growth and Development.
Through the Chair, may I be able to give some additional thoughts on this and then take more questions? Would that be okay?
Yes, that's fine.
Thank you. So my additional comments on this are the author of the initial report prepared for Council, because you know this has been in train for quite a long time, was the City's senior planning consultant at the time, Mr Des Abel. As Manager of Development and Growth, I concur with the reasons provided to not support the application. The following information is provided to Council to substantiate this recommendation. The objective of the mixed-use zone is to provide for a wide variety of land uses which are compatible with residential uses, to allow for development of a mix of varied but compatible land uses such as housing, offices, showrooms, amusement centres, eating establishments and appropriate activities which do not generate nuisance detrimental to the amenity of the district or to the health, welfare and safety of residents. The intent of the objective must be considered in the context of the development application that is linked to and the reason for the proposed scheme amendment. The proposal is not considered to meet the objective for varied but compatible land uses that do not generate nuisance. Workforce accommodation is capable of being approved in the following land use zones: rural, rural townsite, residential, service commercial and light industry. It is considered that there is already sufficient appropriate zoned land across the district for the proposed use. The land uses anticipated within each of the land use zones were carefully considered by the Department of Planning and the WA Planning Commission, as well as the X or not permitted determination for workforce accommodation within the mixed use zone. It can only be determined that the use does not align with the objective of the zone. There is a lack of particular site-specific circumstances that are unique, and the proposal is not of a special or urgent nature, which substantiates adoption of the amendment. The initiation and ultimate approval of the proposed scheme amendment could create an expectation in the community that such amendments are an effective way to achieve an X use outcome. The proposed scheme amendment results from a development proposal that was lodged with the City prior to the gazettal of LPS2 and to the City's local planning policy, workforce accommodation policy coming into effect. As such, the serious consideration of the policy against the development proposal is important. The proposal and the report associated with the scheme amendment does not demonstrate that there is a direct need for the establishment of workforce accommodation lot 4565 in the context of the policy. For the above reasons, the proposal is considered to be inconsistent with the orderly and proper planning of the area, and the use is not one anticipated by the scheme or the community in the surrounding area so soon after gazettal LPS2. Now, should Council have a mind to initiate the proposed scheme amendment, there is being prepared an alternate resolution which can be provided to assist Council in this matter.
Thank you, Manager of Development and Growth. Councillors, there was a lot in that. Do we have any further questions for the Manager? Councillor Turner.
I just have one further question to the officer through the Deputy Mayor. LPS 2 took I'm just asking, that took us a considerable amount of time to get to that, to actually pass that and through the government channels. So there's obviously a view that the proponent had significant time and was, through the reading all the reports, was also advised of that.
Thank you, Officer.
Through the Chair, that is absolutely correct. In having discussions with the proponent, it has been advised that hotel or motel development could be developed on the site as an alternate development for accommodation.
Thank you. Councillor Viskovich also has another one for you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, to the Director. Just wanted to clarify, and more so, I suppose, to put it out there, this block is actually surrounded by residential property. Correct? Is that correct?
Through the Chair. That is correct. From the proposed scheme amendment that was endorsed by Council, it was to be residential. The State and the Commission, in their wisdom, as they did with, as you know, with many other areas, decided that mixed use was more appropriate because it would allow for the opportunity for a range of commercial type activities to be regularised with the City.
Thank you. Councillors, do we have any more questions for the Manager of Development and Growth? No? Thank you. We will move on to 15.4.2, and you can stay there as you are. We'll hand over to the Manager of Development and Growth, Paul Lees.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through the Chair. So Council was asked to consider a sponsorship application from Variety WA for the 2025 Red Dust Revival. Iconic vintage car and motorcycle race will take place on Lake Percolilly between 29th of September and the 5th of October. So as I said last year, it's a large event. They'll have increased visitors numbers with over 15,000 visitors expected for a long week event. Interest from enthusiasts from all over Australia, New Zealand and Canada. The charitable purpose of the event is to raise funds for children's charity. Now, the recommendation is that Council approves the partnership with Variety WA for $100,000 cash and $10,000 in kind towards the event. I know that Council adjourned the item to the February 2025 Ordinary Council meeting clarification. There was a concern that the Goldfields Children's Charity Incorporated, which were the beneficiary of the ball, is the same organisation who is the beneficiary of the Red Dust Revival sponsorship. With respect, this is not the case, as the beneficiary of the Red Dust Revival event is Variety WA Incorporated, in brackets the children's charity.
Thank you, Manager of Development and Growth. Councillors, before we open to questions for the manager, I'll also note that debate on this matter was adjourned on the 20th of January 2025 in the ordinary council meeting, with Councillor Winner being the only member who spoke on that item. So everyone's welcome to ask questions tonight, but next week. Councillor Viskovich, did you have a question? No. Councillor Winner, you have a question for the officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Just through the Deputy Mayor, probably to the Acting CEO, it's more of a procedural question. If next week I was to move this item, would I be entitled to speak again as a right of reply?
Deputy Mayor, I'm going to take that one on notice and double check the standing orders.
Thank you, Acting CEO. Councillors, were there any further questions for the officer regarding 15.4.2? Thank you, Manager of Development and Growth. We'll move on to 15.4.3, the Local Heritage Fund, 127 Burt Street, Boulder. And before I hand over, at the 28th of October 2024 OCM, Council resolved to bring this item to a council workshop with a presentation from the applicant, which we have had. Further consultation was undertaken at a council workshop, and there has been a format change to the report since October, and which is shown within the report. So now I hand over to the Manager of Development and Growth to provide some commentary on this item. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through the Chair, I might have to refer to the report for questions. But just to summarise, the application requests $40,000 for restoration works. So that's the application for the Palace Theatre. The Local Heritage Fund provides grants of up to $10,000 per applicant to support the revitalisation of heritage-listed buildings. That's with exceptional level of significance. So the proposed works for repairs to the external and internal cracking in the masonry walls and parapet and re-rendering plus roof repairs require specialist contractors to undertake the work. The applicant has advised that they were only able to obtain one quote for the specialised works. The quote was for $147,796 for all of the proposed works. Whilst the applicant requested $40,000 for the works, for buildings listed as having considerable level of significance, the policy recommends funding of up to $5,000 per place, but not exceeding 50% of the total cost of the approved works. Now, I think the inference there is that you can't go above the 5, so the 50%, if it was 4,000, you could give 2. Therefore, as a strict reading of the policy, a grant of only 5,000 is available. The officer's recommendation was that it be given for the value of 5,000. However, for council to consider an increase in the amount, they need to consider the purpose of the policy, which is to provide fair and consistent administration of the City of Kalgoorlie-Boulder's Local Heritage Fund.
Thank you, Officer. Councillors, do we have any questions? I'll start with Councillor Viskovich. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to clarify under report, it says Local Heritage Fund policy provides $10,000 per application, and then further down it's saying a maximum of $5,000. What's the difference in the two maximum payments per application?
Thank you, Councillor Viskovich. I'll hand over to the officer.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through the Chair. So the buildings listing is a considerable level of significance. So for a considerable level of significance, it's 5,000 per place, not exceeding 50% of the total cost. For exceptional level, it's 10,000. For an exceptional level of significance, it's 10,000. But for a considerable level of significance, it's 5,000.
Thank you, Officer. Councillors. Councillor Turner.
Just a question to the officer through the Deputy Mayor. Just noting that this policy says that basically we can only give them $5,000. I just have a question that, do we have any other funds that they would be able to access, given that I may be confused, but I believe that we have given grants to perhaps the owners of the Crawford building that received a lot more money, and also the Glendevan Hotel, and I'm just wondering if they applied under something completely different and I've missed something, because $5,000 seems very low when other groups have received significantly more, and perhaps they applied under a different fund.
So your question to the officer is, were the other buildings potentially provided funding through a different funding stream? Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And through the Chair, in the time I have been responsible for reports, no. And in the time I have been responsible for reports, I have, in what's come to Council, I have seriously considered the policy and the recommendation, remembering, of course, that the policy is a guidance policy. And however, as I stated before, the purpose is to provide fair and consistent administration. But I'm sorry, at this stage, the answer is no, I don't believe they've received other funding, not under this policy.
Thank you. Councillor Viskovich.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So just to clarify, the $5,000, do we believe that with the cost of materials and so forth at the moment and building, is this amount, do we need to look at this amount being increased at the cost of renovations and building costs?
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And through the Chair, as I've said on 2 or 3 occasions, I think there are a number of policies that we would do well to consider reviewing, both in the content of the policy and in the levels of funding.
Thank you. Councillors. Councillor O'Donnell, then Winner. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a quick one. It might have to take on notice. Do you know how much money we have in the local heritage fund at the moment, roughly?
Through the Chair, could I take that on notice, please? At the moment, I'll need to do that. Thank you.
Certainly you can. Councillor Winner.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Just through the Deputy Mayor, I have 3 questions. The first one is, has any additional information been provided from the applicant to demonstrate how they would meet the significant shortfall in repair works, which exceed $100,000 if Council was to support this motion?
Thank you, Councillor Winner.
Through the Chair, we have not received anything directly.
Thank you. My second question is, given the policy restricts Council from providing what is being requested from the applicant with a significant difference in what we could approve, have any other funds or avenues offered either externally or by the City which would allow for a greater consideration of amounts been discussed with the applicant?
Through the Chair, no, not at this stage.
Thank you. And my final question is the asset owned by the City, and does the City have any obligations to assist with ongoing maintenance requirements?
Thank you, Councillor Winner. Through to the officer.
Thank you. Through the Chair, I'll just check the report. It is a listed building. I would need the exact ownership of it under title. I would need to have a look at that, as well as the management arrangements. Councillors might be more aware of that than me.
Thank you, Officer. Councillor Winner, another further subsequent question
Thank you.
for the officer.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you for the information. The other part of the question is if there is any obligations from council to provide ongoing maintenance requirements under any current or previous agreements.
Through the chair, I don't believe there are, and I don't know whether the Director of Engineering can help. No, he's saying no, so no.
We'll take that one on notice as well. Thank you. Councillors, any further questions for the Manager of Development and Growth? No. 15.4.4 Event Strategy for 2025 to 2027. This is through the CEO. I'll hand over to the Acting CEO to provide commentary on this item.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through the Chair, Council's asked to endorse a draft event strategy for the period 2025 to 2027.
Thank you, councillors. Do we have any questions regarding item 15.4.4? Councillor Turner.
Just through the Deputy Mayor to the Acting CEO or to the Director of Community Development. I'm not sure who will ask this. So this event strategy, I've got two questions. Firstly, this was done by city officers? I'm not sure. Did the councillors have any input into looking at a change of the event strategy? And if not, is there an option for us to look at adding, perhaps looking at reviewing, adding a couple of other events into there, perhaps something like a New Year's event, looking at funding something like that and putting that into our event strategy? There's been a lot of commentary for several years that we don't have anything over the New Year period, and we have a lot of people that actually are staying. So is there an option for us to look at changing it?
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Councillor, through to the Acting CEO. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the Chair, if Council doesn't want to adopt this as presented, then yes, the opportunity is there for further conversation around it.
Thank you, Acting CEO. Councillor Winner.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. The question asked by Councillor Turner was some of mine. I do have three additional questions, though. The first one is, can the Director outline why the officer's recommendation is to reduce the community events of Youth Fest, the pop-up projects and Kids Fest from every year to every 2 years?
Thank you, Councillor Winner. Through to the Acting CEO.
Thank you. Through the Chair, my understanding is what the events team are trying to do is run things on alternate years so they can focus both budget and attention to different events. So where there's not, for example, a Kids Fest, there would instead be a pop-up event just to create some level of interest and ongoing change within the calendar.
Thank you very much. My second question is the Kaleidoscope project looking at being a direct replacement for Youth Fest, and would it be offered for that age group exclusively, or is it planned to be a whole of community event?
Thank you, Councillor Winner.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor and Councillor Winner. Through the Chair, I will ask Director Hicks to jump in if I miss anything, but the intention of this particular event is that it's a whole community event, not replacing Youth Fest.
Wonderful, thank you. And final question is, would I be correct in assuming that the Kaleidoscope project would be Kalgoorlie-Boulder's first hallmark event?
Thank you, Councillor Winner. Through the Chair, yes, that's the case.
Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Any further questions for 15.4.4? 15.4.5 Bushfire Management Plan. That is also through the Acting CEO.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Director Camporelli is going to speak to this one tonight.
Thank you, and through the Deputy Mayor. Council is asked to adopt the Bushfire Risk Management Plan 2025-2027 as endorsed by the Office of Bushfire Risk Management. The plan provides an information to inform a structured approach to identifying, assessing and prioritising, monitoring and treating bushfire risk. The plan has been years in development, and we are one of the first in our region to actually have our bushfire risk management plan to a point of endorsement.
Thank you, Director Camporelli. Councillors, do we have any questions through to the Director? Thank you. Our next item is 1546, change of use of Holiday House, lot 4788, number 2, Davyhurst Drive, Hannons. I'll hand over to the Manager of Development and Growth, Paul Lees.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through the Chair. Council was asked to approve an application for a retrospective change of use from a single house to a holiday house at number 2 Davyhurst Drive, Hannons. The property in question contains an existing 4-bedroom home. It has been operated as a holiday house since September 24. The City has received no complaints from the use of the property as a holiday house. Property fronts Davyhurst Drive and has a double garage available with vehicle parking for guests. The request is for a maximum of 6 guests with self-check-in between 2 p.m. and 9 p.m, and guests must check out before 10 a.m. The applicant has submitted an operational management plan that includes a code of conduct and outlines the process for managing noise complaints and emergency procedures. The operational management plan prescribes mandatory quiet hours as being from 9 p.m. to 8 a.m, obviously the next day. With the measures in place through the recommended conditions of the approval, it is considered that the ongoing impacts of the use of the dwelling for holiday house is acceptable and consistent with suburban living. It is recommended that Council approve the application with the conditions as included in the Office recommendation, including limiting the approval to 12 months in the first instance.
Thank you, Manager of Director and Growth. Councillors, do we have any questions for the officer tonight? Councillor Viskovich.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I would just like to clarify, if they were approved for the 12 months, when would they need to apply again for them to ensure they don't have any period that it's not a holiday house?
Thank you, Councillor Viskovich.
Through the Chair, we have not included a review clause, so they will have to lodge another application, and they'll obviously have to do that sort of 4 to 6 weeks before it runs out. The 12-month clause, while it has been operating without complaint, is a precautionary principle so that we can in fact see how it operates, Council can see how it operates before they make a decision to extend it further, and it's likely that the next application will be probably for 5 years or permanent.
Thank you, Councillor Viskovich. A subsequent question?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just wanted to clarify also if we've had any complaints or noise complaints, which I believe would go through the police, but have we had any complaints of this property in the past?
I'll send through to the officer.
Thank you. Through the Chair. As I say, it's been operating since September 2024, and we have received no complaints.
Councillors, do we have any further? Councillor Winner.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Is it easily known how many registered holiday houses we have in Kalgoorlie-Boulder at this point in time?
Through to the officer.
Thank you, and through the Chair, yes, I was expecting this at some point in time. So let me take you through what's happened here. The short-term rental accommodation policy has been created by the state to manage short-term rentals, and short-term rentals are basically, by definition, are up to 3 months use. What the state has done in its wisdom is said that to people who own these properties, that if you want to advertise them through the normal channels, and if it comes to the state's attention that they don't have in place all of the required approvals, including a development application, then that there are fairly hefty penalties available. So people are sorting out their house, pardon the pun, in terms of getting these things in place. Just to give you additional, the 6 residents or 6 persons comes basically from the R Code's definition that it's assumed that most houses will have a maximum of six people in them as a house. And also on this item, we are just starting to prepare a policy so that we can actually create a definition. It'll be a scheme amendment. And we'll probably ask council to consider it on its own rather than grouping it with other scheme amendments to actually create a definition of short-term rental accommodation, which we don't currently have in our scheme.
Thank you. Councillor Winner, a further question.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Just through to the officer, are we aware of how many current registered holiday home or short-term rental accommodations we have within the city?
Through the chair, we are aware of them as they come up because they have been operating without approval in some ways, I suppose, by stealth in terms of council's knowledge. They are coming to our attention.
Do we have a number of how many we currently have, though?
As under the definitions, no, we don't.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, any further questions for the officer? I have one, and it's in regards to, you mentioned that we're creating a policy around this. Will that require ministerial approval once that policy has been, I suppose, adopted by council?
Yes, it'll go through, it might go through the basic scheme amendment process, but it'll go to the Commission and it will be advertised. So it will take some time.
Thank you. Councillors, no further questions on item 15.4.6. We'll move on to 15.4.7, another change of use holiday house, lot to number 17A, Home Street, Boulder. And I'll hand you over to the Manager of Development and Growth, Paul Lees.
Thank you again, Deputy Mayor, through the Chair. So again, your council's asked to approve an application for change of use for a single house to a holiday house, 70A Home Street, Boulder. Property in question is part of a 2-lot Strava subdivision. It's on a corner block with the subject property being the rear dwelling fronting Brookman Street. The dwelling gains access, including vehicle access off Brookman Street, but double garage is available for the parking of 2 vehicles. The request for it again is for a maximum of 6 guests with self-check-in between 2 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. and guests must check out before 12 noon. The applicant has submitted an operational management plan, includes a code of conduct and outlines the process for managing noise complaints and emergency procedures. The operational management plan prescribes mandatory quiet hours as being from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. next day. With the measures in place through the recommended conditions of the approval, it is considered that the ongoing impacts of the use of the dwelling for holiday house are acceptable and consistent with suburban living. And again, it is recommended council approve the application, including the limit for 12 months in the first instance.
Thank you. Councillors, do we have any questions for the officer regarding item 15.4.7? Councillor Viskovich.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Being that this is, I think, the 4th house coming through councils on my time, do we now have a report or a spreadsheet to ensure that we're tracking what houses are now going to be registered as a short-term accommodation?
Yes, through the Chair, yes, we are, of course, gathering that information, and it will form part of a proposed scheme amendment for the background of that report.
Thank you. Councillor Viskovich, a subsequent question.
Thank you again, Deputy Mayor. I just also wanted to clarify, with the approval for 12 months, is it the city's responsibility to advise that this approval is coming up for renewal, or does the applicant simply have to reapply every 12 months?
Through the chair, one could say that it's their responsibility, but obviously in terms of compliance and moving towards compliance of those things which we are aware of and are recent, I believe that the city has some responsibility to track these things. Otherwise, we would allow it to drop into non-compliance if it's just a simple letter.
Thank you. Councillors, any further questions for the manager? 15.4.8, change of use for family daycare, lot 3994, number 7, Burton Place, West Lamington. And I'll hand over to the Manager of Development and Growth, Paul Lees, once again.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through the Chair. So Council is asked to approve an application which will, for the approval of a family daycare, which is currently a single house at 7 Burton Place, pardon me, West Lamington. It is proposed to operate a family daycare from an existing 4-bedroom house located within an established residential area. No changes are proposed to the external of the dwelling or the internal configuration. The maximum number of children that it can attend the service is 7, inclusive of the children residing within the property. In this case, it's 2 children under the age of 13. So all children have to be under the age of 13 to be considered as part of a family daycare. Therefore, 5 children will attend the service daily between the hours of 8:30am and 5pm Monday to Saturday. The children will be dropped off from the driveway, which result in a maximum increase of 10 plus vehicle movements per day, a less than minor increase in the overall capacity of the local street network. The street network has a capacity of 3,000 vehicles per day. The activity is required to be licensed under the Childcare Services Act 2007, noting also that children cannot play outside before 8:30am Monday to Saturday, and the applicant must remain a permanent resident of the property. It is recommended that Council approve the application with the conditions as proposed.
Thank you, councillors. Do we have any questions for the officer? Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Officer recommendation, point 6, you mentioned in your spiel, and it's also mentioned on page 106, a maximum of 7 children. On page 106 and in your spiel, you said the maximum of 7, including the 2 children of the owner. In point 6, it just says a maximum of 7 children shall be permitted. That could be misinterpreted that by that you're not including in the brackets, including the 2 owners' children in that recommendation. Also, 7 other children could be allowed to be on the residence, I take it, until the school finishes when her 2 kids turn up.
Sorry, Councillor O'Donnell, your question.
My question is, why isn't the 2 kids included in the maximum of 7, including the owner's 2?
Thank you.
Through the Chair, apologies if some of the language has caused confusion. The maximum number of children that can attend the family daycare centre, the maximum number includes the 2 children. If they were to have another child tomorrow, then it would include that 3rd child. The more children they have, the less others can attend. But it is from 13 and under, it is a maximum of 7 children.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor O'Donnell? Yes. Councillor Viskovich.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just want to clarify, I believe I've asked this before and I could not find the answer. Who assesses the houses, whether they are correct in the legislations that they need to follow for daycares?
Thank you, Councillor Viskovich. Manager for Development and Growth.
Thank you, through the Chair. So The Act, the Childcare Services Act 2007, is quite specific around the regulatory environment, and they will have to make an application to the state, to the appropriate body, which I assume, I'm not an expert, as one would do with a health approval, they will look at the information that's provided to ensure that it's appropriate to have people coming into the home to look after other people's children.
Councillor Viskovich, a subsequent question.
Thank you. So should this be something that we are requesting to hold before providing an approval for a daycare centre at a residency?
Through the chair, what we're... So the principle of... I'm sorry, I will get to your question, but the principle of considering applications under the Planning and Development Act and the regulations are about the application, the planning application. We will add advice notes, as we do with health matters and environmental noise matters, for matters that must be considered under other legislation. But it would be ultra vires or outside of the scope of the law for us to try and include approvals under other pieces of legislation. So we must consider it under the Planning and Development Act and the regulations.
Thank you, Officer. Councillor Viskovich, a further question.
Sorry, just the final one. With Councillor O'Donnell's question before, should we be including in point 6 that the maximum of 7 children shall be permitted includes those residing in the residence?
Thank you, Councillor Viskovich. Through to the officer.
Through the chair, that's not an unreasonable thing to do, for clarity.
Thank you, councillors. Any further questions for the officer regarding 1548? 1549, disposal of land at 1 Trasimeno Way, and I'll hand over to the man on the job tonight, the Manager of Development and Growth, Paul Lees.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And through the chair, Council is asked to consider a request from Australia Homes Proprietary Limited for the acquisition of Lot 72, Number 1, Trasimeno Way, Somerville, through a market-led proposal based on the market value of the land. As illustrated in the report, Australia Homes would like to construct up to 17 dwellings on the land, which is 3,916 square metres in size, giving an average net lot size of 220 square metres, consistent with the R Code's density of R40. Australia Homes are a well-known builder in Kalgoorlie-Boulder, and their building designs result in the efficient use of residential lots in the city, whether greenfield or brownfield redevelopment lots. It is recommended that Council authorise the Chief Executive Officer to effect public notice in accordance with Section 358 of the Local Government Act 1995, remembering that the authorisation is only for public notice. Section 358 requires that the matter be brought back to Council for consideration, including any submissions the City receives from the public notice.
Thank you. Councillors, any questions for the officer regarding 1549? Councillor Turner.
Just a question to, well, I suppose to the officer, but it may be the acting CEO as well, through the Deputy Mayor. With the valuation, do we just get one valuation or do we get a couple of valuations and check them? So just a question. What's the valuation of the property?
Thank you. Through to the officer.
Thank you. Through the chair. In this case, we requested the valuation Acumentis, and we didn't ask for any other valuations. As they do, assess the valuation against the value of other similar properties. And we have accepted the valuation, haven't gone looking for others.
Thank you. Councillors, any further questions for the officer regarding 1549? I do have one. Is the land fully serviced and ready to build on? So is there all water, power and sewer already attached to this land?
Deputy Mayor, I understand that the block is fully serviced. We can do further due diligence on that and come back if the answer that is something other than that, but I understand it is to that point. Remembering, of course, that there is part of the block where one of the roads basically doesn't, one of the streets doesn't continue up the full length of that land, but that's not going to cause a problem with this process. And from the plans that they've provided, which obviously are conceptual, and if something changes, they might have to build or extend that road. At the moment, we are talking about commencing the process and not talking about a DA or a subdivision plan, which obviously has to go to the state.
Thank you. Councillors, any further questions for 15.4.9? 15.4.10, additional requirements for historic road closure of KCGM Fimiston South project. And I'll hand over to Paul Lees, the Manager of Development and Growth.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through the Chair. So, Council's resolution of 10th of July 2023 approved the closure of a number of historic roads associated with KCGM Fimiston South project, with the exception of an on-paper road, which is the subject of this report. Northern Star Resources, NSR, have been communicating with city officers over the road closures, and the proposed closure of the on-paper road that is the subject of this report has stalled because the dedicated road within Landgate Polygon 117.144 and 117.4445 provides either real or perceived access to Reserve 35662, which are lots 123 and 124. Just noting that reserve actually has a large lot associated with it to the north. The city has a management order over the reserve for the purpose of parklands. Officers of the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage have advised that to remove or to de-gazette the on-paper road entirely, in other words, remove all legal access, City will need to relinquish the management order over that part of the reserve accessed by the road, that's lots 123, 124, and the land will become UCL, which is unleased Crown land. Or the other alternative was to request that the on-paper road be closed and an easement be established providing legal rights for pedestrian and vehicle access along the route, either actual or notional. NSR had been made aware of the options open to the city to achieve the desired outcome. In other words, they've been party to emails between the department and ourselves around what might be possible. As you would imagine, with the time that's gone by, there's been a lot of emails back and forward. So to clarify the process, the city sought advice on the matter, and the advice confirms that the creation of an easement will allow the reserve and its purpose as parklands held by the city to remain in force whilst meeting the objectives of NSR for road closures. The advice in particular advises that the relinquishment of the reserve is a serious matter for the city and its community, and that whilst not serving the reserve purpose currently, it may do so sometime in the future. Some generations ahead, mines do rehabilitate and they can have other uses. The officer's recommendation is therefore that Council considers agreeing to the road closure, requests an easement to be established for pedestrian and vehicle access, and directs the CEO to advise the Minister for Lands that the Fimiston South proponent that Council does not support the revocation of the management order over Reserve 35662 for parklands or any other part of that reserve at this stage. Noting, I would say as an addition, that if council had a view that they should give up the reserve, we certainly could provide a briefing to council of how in fact that was created.
Thank you. Councillors, any questions for the officer? Thank you. The next item on next week's agenda is 15.4.11, the final adoption of Scheme Amendment Number 1, and I'll hand over to the Manager of Development and Growth, Paul Lees.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through the Chair. Council is asked to consider the adoption of Scheme Amendment Number 1, as outlined in the report, to rezone lots 337 to 342 Forest Street and lots 343 to 346 Havelock Street, South Boulder, from residential zone land to light industry zone. The proposed amendment was previously presented to Council on the 19th of August 2024, and the proposed scheme amendment was advertised in accordance with the resolution of Council in the Kalgoorlie Miner and the West Australian newspapers. The City received no objections from the notification. The final adoption of the proposed scheme amendment is considered supportable in this instance for the following reasons. The proposal aligns with the City's local planning strategy and strategic community plan. The proposed rezoning of the land will be consistent with the light industry zoning of the area to the south and north. The land is exposed to the impacts of the light industrial activities to the south and north and noise traffic from the Goldfields Highway. The land has a buffer of approximately 75 metres at the nearest point to the residential development to the west, Havelock Street, Outram Street and Reserve 46341. 8 of the 10 lots are vacant and undeveloped, and the potential impact of light industry development on the residential development to the west can be appropriately mitigated at the development application stage. No objection was received from the public consultation period. Accordingly, it's recommended that Council support the proposed scheme amendment by agreeing with the officer's recommendation. That includes all matters required by the relevant legislation.
Thank you. Councillors, do we have any questions for the officer? Councillor Winner.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I have 2 questions for the officer. The first one is, given we as a city are desperate for more residential land, particularly land which already has access to sewage, water and power availability, what is the planned intent of the area if it was to be changed to light industry?
Through to the officer. Thank you, Councillor Winner.
Through the Chair. If it becomes light industry zoning, then it allows proponents to apply for land use, development and use consistent with light industry. So these are uses which are not considered to be offensive uses. So usually they're not loud and smelly. They're not like, full industrial uses. And obviously, considering the size of the blocks, there would be requests for amalgamation to create land parcels which actually are suited to industrial development, both in terms of buildings and use.
Thank you, Councillor Winner. A further question?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. The second question is, I note within the report the engineer does raise some concerns in regards to industrial vehicles. So given the area is not designed to incorporate industrial vehicles, would changing the zoning potentially lead to additional requirements for road modifications and increased road maintenance costs for the city in the future?
Sorry, I'll try and... I didn't get the question part, but I'll try and answer the question part. I think I know what you're asking. Development of the site, which would be brought to Council as development applications, will need to address the full servicing of the land for the proposed use, including roadways, access and services. If the development is in the periphery and there is a chance that it could cause nuisance, then obviously any application would have to mitigate that as well. How the scheme sees it in terms of light industry, other than mixed use, light industry is one of those zones where the scheme envisages that it is actually not compatible with, but able to be, the impacts are able to be mitigated on residential use. So it's kind of a sort of a buffer use between residential and other more problem-causing areas.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Winner, did you have a further question by the look of your face?
I do, thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. If the city was to change the zoning, however, would the city then be liable for improvements or requirements for any of the roads or anything in that space because it's a city that's changed the zoning?
Through the Mayor, my understanding is that under the Local Government Act, there needs to be access, there needs to be public road access to every lot. But obviously, as the use in that area turns to a higher order use, then clearly there are in applications conditions requiring the upgrading, as there was for the one near the floodway for workforce accommodation, where they in fact had to construct a road, if you recall that one.
Thank you. Councillors, any further questions for the officer tonight? Thank you. And that is our last item on the agenda. We do have one confidential item. So we'll now take a break on our live stream, and anyone who's in the public gallery, no one? Thank you. We've resumed after questions being asked regarding our confidential item on next week's agenda. And I note the time for closure of the meeting tonight, and that is 7:46 p.m. Thank you.